All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Going to be breaking down the Monday night matchup here between the Carolina Panthers and the San Francisco 49ers. Let's start out here with the game preview. So this is projected to be a pretty high scoring game at 49.5 total points, with the point spread being about 7.5 in favor of the Niners. Both of those I would agree with. So for prop betting purposes, I actually think that sets up pretty darn well for us in this game. So with that, I do want to start out here with the Carolina Panthers, breaking down my favorite bets for them, and then we'll get into the Niners. All right, so the first bet that I like is actually going to be Jalen Coker to get over 2.5 receptions. We do see that in over 3 out of the last 4 games, he's been able to get the over here. Okay, obviously 3, 1, 3, and 4. And we take a peek at the game log. That's really what I like, guys. 4 targets in both of those games, which obviously pretty darn good stuff there. The game against Green Bay was just a game in which they did not really need to throw the football. What's nice about these last 4 games is that those games were all games in which you saw about 63 to about 70% of the snaps. And so if we can rely on that, guys, that's really what we want to be targeting. And the nice thing here is he gets a very good matchup against this Niners defense that has given up the second most receptions to opposing receivers. So just assuming that he plays about the same snaps that he's been getting, both route share and just total snaps, his projection would be based off of that about 3.04 receptions. So obviously getting to about 3. Now, do I want to bet on him to get over 3 receptions? Probably not, but I do think at 2.5, that does end up being a solid bet. Even though it's going to be a slightly reduced payout, I'm okay getting to that bet. Now, I will say part of the appeal of that bet is maybe Xavier Legette being still a little bit banged up. He's practiced in full over the past, couple of practices. Thursday practice in full, so I'm assuming Friday and Saturday. Pretty much good to go there for him, but still he was a little bit banged up at the end of the game. He finally kind of had a breakout game himself, but overall I'm pretty confident in the role that Coker is going to have in this game. And then we go heading into one of the easier bets on the day, just in general, guys. It's going to be Bryce Young to get over his fantasy score here at 13.5 on PrizePicks. Okay, Underdog has it at 15, which this could actually end up being a little middling bet there as well. Again, these two lines are calculated exactly the same between the two sites. That should not be happening. So I do like Bryce Young to get over 13.5 for his fantasy score. It is a solid matchup in regards to like the tight ends and also receivers having pretty good production in the air, but overall it's about a middle matchup for quarterbacks. And I do kind of assume that one of these lines are going to update throughout the day. If they don't, you could easily end up betting both sides of these, because again, this should simply not be happening. And both data points that we have coming in, average sportsbook line, which is the collection of all the various sportsbooks, as well as the projection data, which is a separate data source, they're telling us it should be in the middle there as well. But that just ended up being a bet that was too good to not show you guys. And now it's actually going to be kind of the same case with Rico Dowdle in regards to his fantasy score, guys. Underdog is probably overvaluing him a little bit too much. They have him at 17 for his fantasy score. I actually don't mind the idea of betting on the under for that. At the same time, the Niners do give up a lot of receptions to opposing running backs as well. And so if you want to get to Rico Dowdle to get like over 2.5 receptions, say on a more traditional sports bet or an Underdog, I do end up liking that bet there as well. And so it really just comes down to whether or not they are able to establish the run, which against the Niners, they have been pretty good, especially in comparison to their weaknesses at stopping the run. Teams have been able to get their running backs involved. They'll throw in the football. And again, that's kind of why I like over 2.5 receptions. They get the second most receptions to opposing running backs thus far this year. Now, they also do give up a lot of work to opposing tight ends as well, the Niners do. I just don't think we need to be on Sanders or Tremble. To me, that's like too much of a guessing game. They are splitting the work. If I were to like place the bet, it probably would be on Tremble to get his over here, because it should be basically the same as Sanders. Although Sanders, guys, got more targets last week. Sanders ended up getting 4 targets. Tremble ended up getting 2. One of them ended up being a big play, but Tremble ended up playing 56% of the snaps total, but it had only a 36% route share, whereas Sanders ended up with 42%. So Sanders is definitely more of the pass catching tight end. And then we go ahead and jump on into the Niners, guys. This line here for Ricky Pearsall at 2.5 receptions to me just seems to be egregiously low. Sure, on PrizePicks is going to be a goblin bet at 2.5. You can get on Underdog for a reduced payout bet. That's just going to be the case because it is likely to hit. But just the fact that this is kind of the line that he's set at, to me, is just like egregiously low. And so I don't mind the idea of betting him to get over 2.5 receptions. If you want to bet on him to get over 3.5 receptions, I also don't mind that. Now, don't get me wrong. Last game ended up being more of a Juwan Jennings game and also more of a George Kittle game. The beauty of the Niners is that they are healthy. That's not going to it's not going to be an offense where we're going to see everything be funneled to, a certain amount of players. They are going to tend to spread out the wealth. And so we saw Ricky Pearsall come back last week, guys, and instantly played 73% of the snaps and had an 85% route share. Now, sure, he only ended up with 3 targets on the day and 27 air yards, but indeed, it was his first game back. Now, that being said, you saw CMC end up with 6 targets in the game. You saw George Kittle with 6, and then Jawan Jennings also with 6. All those 3 players were decently involved. But you got to remember, at the start of the season, Ricky Pearsall was the number 1 pass catcher. Once he got injured, then you saw CMC start to get more work at catching passes. Obviously, George Kittle was a little bit banged up at the start of the season as well, but he was their top pass catcher. And so I was just shocked at the line that we were getting for him. And so I don't mind him to get over 3.5 receptions. The issue is, one, going to be the game total. If he is not involved, early on, maybe we do see more of a run-heavy approach where CMC is getting going. And also maybe Brian Robinson Jr. gets going as well. But for me, guys, with him getting 85% of the snap or routes, 73% of the snaps in his first game back after sitting for so long, that was heavily encouraging to me. And even though the matchup isn't the best, I just think that number is just way too low for him. And then another bet that I don't mind is George Kittle to end up having a good game just in general. I do expect him to continue to do that. You look at the matchup here with the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers actually don't give up that many receptions to opposing tight ends. Not too many touchdowns as well, only 5 on the year. But they do give up a lot of receiving yards to opposing tight ends. So they've given up 718 thus far this season, which is going to be the 4th most. And so I kind of look at that, and I do think George Kittle, who has the great since he's returned from injury, I do think that ends up being kind of a bad line for him. And so I do like him to kind of continue the hot stretch that he's been on here, over the last 2 games, really. But, he's looked good since he's returned from injury. Now, if you were making those 2 bets, if you like Ricky Pearsall like I do, and if you want to get to George Kittle due to kind of the decent matchup for him, you probably would be looking to bet on Jennings to get under any of his unders, really, would be kind of the route to go. So I don't need to necessarily get there, but I did want to call it kind of that thought process there. And that is worth calling out, guys. Christian McCaffrey to get under his fantasy score of 24 is the highest out there for his line. This bet has a 54% likelihood to hit. I don't mind that. At the same time, I will feel pretty darn stupid if CMC just goes off in this game against the Carolina Panthers, where, again, they are 7.5 point favorites. Now, if you are doing that under, again, kind of thought process wise, you'd probably want to be looking at Brock Purdy for any of his overs. Okay, probably his over pass yards, maybe even his over fantasy score. But we are just seeing the Niners are probably someone's overvalued here for this team, obviously, right? And then that being said, guys, if it does end up being a game that's a blowout, I don't mind the idea again to Brian Robinson Jr. to get over his rush yards. We do know that in the last game, 24 there, he did end up with 31% of the snaps. That was basically the most ideal situation we could ask for, actually. And I've gained 8 carries in that game. That game was a blowout. But at the same time, if this game does end up being a blowout, I wouldn't mind the idea of, getting to him for over 24.5. I just don't necessarily need to do that. But if you were thinking about betting on CMC to get his under fantasy score, that also wouldn't be a terrible bet to maybe potentially attach to that. And so then we go ahead and get into the bet of the day here, guys. Just showing you guys it on underdog. Again, Coker over his receptions, Rico Dowdle over his receptions. If you don't want that, you can always bet on his under fantasy score. As I mentioned, it's kind of like a toss-up. Do you think he's going to be involved and have a good game? Then obviously bet on his over 2.5 receptions. That's the part where the Carolina Panthers are going to attack that Niners defense with him. Okay, and they've done a good job of doing that just as well. The Panthers have used Dowdle in the best way possible for that specific matchup. So that's encouraging to me. Last week, guys, he didn't have that many rush yards, but he ended up having a very good day catching the ball in the backfield. Against the Green Bay Packers, they just rushed the football a bunch, and obviously he went off in that game. George Kittle, again, I like the matchup there, so we're targeting that. And then the Ricky Pearsall bet, that's just too low there for him. And then again, Bryce Young to get over 13.5 for his fantasy score on PrizePicks ends up being one of the better bets that we are getting on the day. If you think he's going to struggle, guys, bet on his under at 15.3 on underdog for his fantasy score. So did want to call it those 2 bets. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Appreciate you being here. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you guys would like access to any of the tools that you saw throughout this video, head on over to 9to5sports.com. Get access to all those tools for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. If you guys are looking to play NFL DFS on DraftKings as well, jump on over to the 9to5 DFS YouTube channel. We'll be covering that game there as well. Thanks for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.